Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Verlita White. I am the proud superintendent of Roanoke City Public Schools. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. I know that we have everyone from parents, teachers, students, community members on the line with us tonight. And as I always say, you could be anywhere else, but you have chosen to be here with us tonight. And for that, we thank you. We are so appreciative of your support. And I just would like to also thank you. If you are a parent, thank you for hanging in there with us. For our students, thank you for your hard work and your diligence. And yes, I am going to remind you throughout to keep studying. Study, 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 study. Many of you know that I've been in your classrooms and I've pointed at the screen, study, study, study. So I want you to keep doing that. To our teachers, you know how much we love you, we support you, and that's why we're here tonight. This town hall meeting is in support of you because you invest in your children, you invest in education, you invest in public education, and we want to thank you for that. We want to thank you for your support. We want to thank you for your patience. We want to thank you for your diligence. And thank you for working with us. We know that at the beginning of this calendar year, we did not know that this pandemic would hit. We had no idea that we would be in this situation. But we are moving forward one step at a time, baby steps, so that we can keep everyone safe, because health and safety are our top priorities right now. And we need to make sure that, yes, we are ensuring the academic performance of our students. We want to make sure that we are not discounting the social needs of our students as well, those social emotional needs. And we just want to make sure that we are providing a high quality instructional program for our kids, but in a safe environment. And so we just want to start by thanking you for showing up, thanking you for working alongside us as we figure it out together as a community. Tonight, we're going to go over what's working well and what's not working so well. We have a few questions that have been submitted ahead of time. You can submit questions all throughout the town hall meeting. And yes, I have a whole folder of feedback here. I just wanted to show you. And we go through each and every one. This is important because, as you know, we have a transition and restoration task force. And so we have to make sure that we're taking your feedback back to the task force so that we can make our way forward. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce our outstanding team who's here to support you in every way. And so I'd like to introduce them at this time. They'll be joining me tonight as you submit your questions, and they'll be helping me to answer some of those questions. I'd like to introduce them at this time. So first, I'd like to introduce Chris Perkins. He is the Acting Chief Operations Officer. So, hi, Chris. I'd also like to introduce Kathleen Jackson. She's our Chief Financial Officer. Hi, Kathleen. I'd like to introduce Dr. Julie Drury. She's the Executive Director for School Improvement. Dr. Timothy Hahn is the Executive Director of Student Services. Joyce Hatcher, Executive Director for Human Resources. Also, Greg Johnston, Executive Director for K-5 Instruction. Haley Poland, Executive Director of Special Education. Tasha Steele, Executive Director of Equity and School Counseling. Tasha. Justin McLeod, Director of Public Relations and Marketing. Michael Trussell, Director of Data and Analysis. And Britt Simmons, Technology Support Coordinator. Britt is kind of like the wizard behind the curtain. He's making all the technology work for us tonight, and many of you have been in contact with him, so we thank our technology team. Again, before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone again for your hard work and for working alongside us, like I said before, to make sure that we are providing a high quality instructional program for our students, and also to pave our way forward. So again, no one has a playbook on this. So we can learn from each other. We take your suggestions. We look at what's best in practice. We move forward with what we know is best in terms of pedagogy and instruction for our students. We listen to our teachers. But tonight it's also about listening to all of you so that we can continue to pave our way forward. I know that this year's theme is We Will Rise, and you are certainly rising to the occasion. And for that, I do thank you again. I am going to go over the first quarter. I want to make sure that we're hearing from you as far as what's working well and what's not working so well. I know that we have been out and about. We've visited schools. We've had various town hall meetings. We've had parent town hall meetings. We've had staff town hall meetings, and we're going to continue to do so because your perspective matters. Your opinion matters. Your experience matters. And if you are a student here tonight, your experience especially matters. So I want you to tell us as well how everything is going for you. And then we'll go over the second quarter and what the plans are. We have an approved plan that was approved by our school board on August 11th. And that plan calls for the students that we have coming in for the first quarter to continue to come for the second quarter. So that means students who spend more than 50% of their day in special education programming, they would also continue in the second quarter to come in person. Students who are our level 1 English learners, they would still continue to come in person in the second quarter. Students in our graduation cohort would continue to come in the second quarter in person. They have been specifically identified for additional support. And those who are coming in the first quarter will continue to come in the second quarter as well. But for the second quarter, the approved plan also calls for our elementary students, pre-K to 5, to come in person 2 days a week. Now, this is an important component to note because I know that all of us want kids back in school. We want all of our students in school. And our teacher by teacher will tell me this on a daily basis as I visit schools. You know, we want our kids back. We need to see our kids, right? And we want kids back in school. We just have to make sure that we're doing so safely and that we are taking into account the pandemic right now and COVID-19 and making sure that everyone stays safe in the process. So with that, we have to make sure that we are accounting for physical and social distancing. I'd rather say physical distancing because the social part we absolutely need. So the physical distancing of 6 feet, we have to make sure that we have the PPE, the personal protective equipment that we need to keep everyone safe. We also have to make sure that we have the cleaning and sanitizing, disinfecting materials on hand, and that we have the space and the staff in order to do it all and to do it all well. We also have to take into account where we are COVID-wise. So remember in the beginning that, well, throughout this time, the COVID numbers continue to fluctuate. We're pretty much still flat, but those numbers regionally continue to fluctuate. Regionally right now for our region, we are still in the high range as the Run-Up Times noted even in today's paper. There's an uptick in cases. And if I could make my plea to everyone who is listening right now and watching, we can't get complacent when it comes to our mitigation kind of factors. So if I could just put in a plug for masks, here's mine, so that we can get kids back in school sooner rather than later. Let's not get too relaxed. And we talk to our health officials on a weekly basis. On a weekly basis, I know that I personally talk to our local health officials about where our numbers are. We are still in the city, we still have high levels of transmission, community transmission. However, 3 weeks ago, we were in the moderate range. So we know that there is hope. We just have to make sure that we're not becoming too relaxed, and we want to make sure that we're getting our students back into school sooner rather than later. So that second quarter again, elementary students 2 days a week in person. And with that, we have to keep in mind that the other 3 days, there is a trade-off here. If you watched the school board meeting last week, you know what I'm going to say. It is very difficult as a teacher for me to have a group of students in front of me and to have a group of students online. We're seeing some of that stretch right now, as some of our learners are in person right now, and we have students online. It's a huge stretch for our teachers to be able to handle all of that at once and to do it well. We want to make sure that the instruction that is delivered is high quality instruction, that it's instruction that's engaging. It's not just a placeholder, but it's actual instruction, engaging instruction, where kids know what they're learning and why they're learning it. They're able to be engaged in various ways, independently, sometimes yes, but they need to engage in conversation. And we need to make sure that we are properly evaluating where kids are. And so I always say we need to teach to our kids' eyes and not to the clock. So in doing so, we have to provide the time, the space, and the effort to be able to do that and allow our teachers to do what they do in the best way that they can. And so to do that, that means that on the other 3 days, that would mean predominantly asynchronous instruction, which means more independent study. Now, I have heard from some of our early childhood educators saying the 3 days a week that would be predominantly asynchronous might be a little difficult for our 5- and 6-year-olds. And I'm definitely going to take that feedback back to our task force, because I think that's important information for them to know as we move forward. So keep that in mind. As I go through, and I just want to make sure that we are understanding the entire timeline here that we're talking about, and then I promise we're going to get to your questions. I know that our time is, we only have a finite amount of time together here tonight, so the majority of this time is about you, but I just want to make sure that we all have a baseline of understanding. Again, I've been over the first 9 weeks, second 9 weeks, in-person instruction from the first quarter that I mentioned, as well as pre-K to 5 alternating 2 days a week. Also for the third 9 weeks, the third quarter, students 4 days per week, Monday through Thursday, and students in the virtual academy may continue. Keep in mind that the virtual academy, particularly for elementary students, will be available. So if you choose the virtual academy, and I know that there was a question that was time. Will the virtual academy be available for the year? Do you have to sign up for the full year? Right now, we are taking this quarter by quarter. Remember, I said baby steps. So I know that sometimes it's hard to plan that way, but we are trying to do things in as timely a fashion as we can, because we know that you have to plan. We know that you have to arrange daycare. We know that you have to arrange extracurricular activities, and we know what you're up against. So we're trying to get information out as soon as possible. But this connection is so vital and so important. And so don't give up on us. Stay with us as we continue to communicate and keep our lines of communication open. And then certainly for the last quarter, we're hoping to be back on track with 5 days a week, and certainly the virtual academy, particularly for elementary students as we move forward. So with that, if you please stay to the end, I do have some updates in terms of the intent form and all of that. I'll share all of that at the end of our session here tonight, and I'll ask my team not to let me forget that. But we'll talk about some bus times and we'll get into all of that. But I want to get right to the questions, because that's why you're here tonight. And again, continue to submit those questions to us, and we'll take those along the way. I'm going to start with this one that has come in, and it says, will a 100% virtual learning academy be available through RCPS for the remainder of the school year? If not, will arrangements be made for students to transfer to the virtual academy or another similar program? Dr. Drury, would you like to take that one, or Mr. Johnson?
Yes, thank you, Ms. White. For elementary schools, the virtual academy will be available 100% for students to do that for the entire school year. That is an option. We want to make sure that people understand that and that it will be available for the elementary schools. Yes.
And for secondary, it's going to be a stretch because we have so many teachers that teach singleton courses. Like we have a physics teacher that teaches at both of our high schools, and that's the only physics teacher we have. For a lot of our middle schools, we have a band teacher or a choir teacher, an orchestra teacher that might teach at 2 different schools. And so it's going to mean that we will probably have to have parents giving us a really solid intent that's going to be a binding intent soon, so that we know who intends to bring their kids back in person and who intends to keep them at home, so that we can redo all of our master schedules, which will probably mean changes in teachers. It's going to mean a lot of work to make sure it happens, but we will do what it takes.
Indeed, we will, because certainly the work that we have to do pales in comparison to what our parents have to do on a daily basis. So we will do whatever we need to make it work. The second question here, are principals visiting virtual classrooms to monitor teachers and students? I know that I have personally seen principals monitoring what teachers and students are working on together. Mr. Johnston, Dr. Drury, would you like to also chime in here?
Yes, principals do have the ability, and they are doing it. They are looking at and monitoring the instruction through Microsoft Teams. They're able to go on there when the Teams meetings are live. They're also able to monitor not only the teachers, but the students. They're also able to go onto the Canvas pages and to see exactly what the students are seeing, and they're able to monitor that. The third way that we've seen principals monitor instruction is actually physically going into the classrooms where teachers are on site and watching their instruction occurring. So yes, they are able to do that, and they are doing it.
And I will second that for secondary. I've seen principals who actually attend the class because they've heard that there's a student that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and so they'll get on there and say, you need to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. They've been going to classrooms and seeing the teachers actually instructing, and they have been going into all of the Canvas rooms and seeing what their teachers have been posting and watching actual lessons being taught through Teams. So it's been a fun ride.
I have to say that many of our teachers have shared with me that they're so proud of our students for showing up in the way that they are showing up on time, they're submitting their assignments. And so I know that I speak for so many of our teachers who want to give kudos to our students out there for showing up and for producing the work that they are assigned. So good job, kids. Doing a good job. So the next one we did get ahead of time. So I'm going to ask Mr. Perkins to help me with this one. I know he has some information here. What is the task force looking for number-wise to get our children back into school? So, and I'll just start here. Mr. Perkins, you can jump in. So it's not a particular number, right? Because as we know, and we've seen those numbers kind of fluctuate. We are looking at trends over time. We are in constant communication with our health officials as well, making sure that we understand where we are as a region, as well as where we are by locality in terms of our city and our numbers. We also have to keep in mind the cases that are coming up for us as a school system. We know that we have had some positive cases. We've had teachers, and we've had staff members and students as well who may be exhibiting some symptoms where they're not quite sure if they're positive or not, but we still have to act on that, right? So we have to keep in mind our numbers within Roanoke City Public Schools, as well as our regional numbers, as well as by locality as well. So Mr. Perkins, would you like to take us through where we are?
Yes, I'll be happy to. And the good thing is we did have this question ahead of time, and I'm going to actually share a screen and walk you through a new decision-making tool that the Virginia Department of Education and the Virginia Department of Health launched on Monday for us to use. So I'm going to use numbers as of September 30th to walk you through how we're using this decision-making tool. So the first thing, or the first core indicator that we want to look at as a school system, and remember this is just one part of the many things we look at, but is the total new cases per 100,000 within the last 14 days. For the city of Roanoke, we fall in the 374.3 cases over the last 14 days per 100,000 in our city. So that would place us in the highest risk for transmission in schools. The second core indicator that we look at using this decision-making matrix is the percent of positive tests during the last 14 days. For the city of Roanoke, that is 5.8%. The third core category or indicator that we look at is the implementation of mitigation, health mitigation strategies. For us, we fall in the lower risk because we have implemented all 5 strategies recommended by the CDC. That is face coverings, social distancing, hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, cleaning, disinfecting, and contact tracing with our local health department. So the next question is, well, so what do we do with that? So if you look at this, we're kind of stretched across from low to high on those indicators. So we go to the next part of the tool. That then indicates that we would fall in the moderate to higher range, and we would refer to phase 2 guidance. And we would go through and we'd look at our building capacities, our staffing, our how we would social distance on buses to help inform our decisions.
Thank you so much. Now, this question just came in, and I'm just I'm going to read it. Mr. Perkins, I'm going to turn to you for this one as well. How are you going to ensure that students follow social distance? You want to talk about our principals are working on that ahead of time?
Yes, so we worked with a group of architects, and they laid out circulation plans for us. Our buildings are all marked where we know how to run the flow of students between classes, how to social distance within the classes. All of those were mapped out for us. All of those are provided to our principals. We then did executive staff walkthroughs to make sure that everybody was on the same page on how we could social distance. Now, it does boil down to the routines that we create. And remember, on that decision-making process, I mentioned inconsistency. Human nature, people are drawn to each other. We're very communal. And so it's going to take a routine of our principals, our teachers, our staff members, our students, parents helping us with this, reminding them, keep your distance, wear your face coverings, and that's how we'll be successful. It takes all of us to work on those routines, especially the more students we add into school.
Thank you for that. Now this question says, how will we make sure that our teachers are not overwhelmed if they are required to teach virtual students and in-person students? So this is a really good question, and just let me make sure that I take some time to clarify here, especially when we're talking about bringing students in 2 days a week at the elementary level. We are going to have a virtual academy as well, where students who have chosen fully virtual will be taught by virtual academy teachers who are going to apply for that process, so that a teacher is not trying to do both. And again, we want our teachers to be able to do what they do well, be able to focus. And so it's hard to have that type of stretch. So we're really trying to sort that out, which means that if you are choosing the virtual academy option, it will be likely that you are not going to have your Chinese teacher that you have right now, that you will be assigned a virtual academy teacher. But that way, the teachers who are teaching students in person will be only teaching students in person, and then virtual academy teachers will have their virtual classroom, if you will. So I just hope that that clarifies. We've gotten several questions about that from our teachers, and I want to make sure that we are clearing that up as far as the plan there for our teachers. The next question has to do with, this one just came in about who holds teachers accountable. And certainly that's our principals. And shout out to all of our principals out there. We know that we value our principals and we thank our principals for their leadership. It is part of a principal's role, certainly, to evaluate the operation of the entire schoolhouse, first of all, and to make sure that they are accounting for the general operations of the schoolhouse, but they are also instructional leaders. And that means that they have to observe instruction, meet with teachers, certainly make sure that that instruction is paramount, and they monitor that. So in terms of who holds teachers accountable, that's our principals. This question has to do with Preston Park. How are you going to handle spacing issues at Preston Park Elementary School? So it's not just Preston Park where we see that we might have some issues with when it comes to spacing. And Mr. Perkins, you can have to refresh my memory here, but I believe that the 3 schools in terms of spacing that are really a challenge for us would be Preston Park, Westside, and Grandin Court. Do I have that correct?
That is correct.
He's head nodding going on, that's good. And so, yes, we may have to be creative, especially if the plan, changes. But right now, if we go with our approved plan, it looks like we should be okay with spacing. Where it gets tricky is if when we start bringing in more students, more days per week, and then we might have to be a little more creative with how we handle those 3 schools. Mr. Perkins, do you want to add to anything there?
Yeah, the good thing about what we've done by working with architects and then working with our building principals, we know where our capacity is reached and we know where some of our alternatives lie. So the reason for the baby steps helps us to plan better for this. Because once we start expanding into rooms and we keep our social distancing, that means we have to have extra staff to cover those rooms. And so, Ms. White, what you said was absolutely right on point.
Thank you. All right. The next one says, please consider allowing teachers to use Fridays as office hours. So again, if there's one thing that we continue to hear consistently, and if there's one thing that I continue to hear consistently as I visit school buildings, is that teachers are overwhelmed and that many times they are answering questions late into the evening. They are working from 7 in the morning and sometimes until 9 at night, through lunch times, through planning time. And again, we as a community, and one thing that I am so proud of in our community is how we value our teachers and how we are taking care of not only of our students, but our teachers as well. So this is something that I promised that I would work on, and I'm continuing to do so. I thought I could make an announcement last week or even tonight. I can't because we have to make sure that we have the complexities of the issue worked out before we can do that. But it is on our radar, and I want our teachers to know that it is on our radar. Okay, so the next one says, if the positivity rate is down, why is RCPS not bringing back high school students until late January when everyone else in the Valley has students already back in the buildings? So I just want us to make sure that we understand where we are. I think we've just kind of covered a lot of that in terms of our numbers in the Valley, making sure that we understand the fluctuations. And this is another piece that that concerns us, quite frankly, as well. We want our students back in school, and we understand the social aspects when it comes to having our middle and high school students in school as well. But we also want high quality instruction, and we want our students to be able to Socialize, yes, but we also want them to make sure that they're keeping up with our content. One of the things that teachers have shared with me about their concerns, if we are to use a one-day-a-week model, let's say, for instance, for students, our teachers are concerned about students keeping up in the curriculum, given that they have to teach the same content time and time again. We're also concerned that teachers would have that one touch point in person with their students one day a week, but then may not see their teacher again until next week. That's something that we've heard back from our teachers. Certainly, we are constantly looking at models around us to see if there's any way to adhere to space guidelines, making sure that we have the staffing to do so, and making sure that we can keep up with the instructional program in a high quality way. If we can do that, certainly we will propose another option to the task force to consider as they're considering making a recommendation to the school board. So I want you to know that it is always on our radar. And as you notice, throughout Virginia, school systems are having to change and adjust along the way. And we are no different. That as we learn more and as we research more and we see what's best in practice, certainly we're not digging our heels in. We are as flexible as we need to be so that we can get our boys and girls back to school as soon as we can. This one says, how is RCPS addressing the social emotional development of high school students when they have had no interaction with peers, teachers, or coaches in several months? So Mrs. Steele, will you help us with that one?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And we do recognize that many of our students miss having those interactions with peers and the adults in school. And so we've been working to provide a number of opportunities for our students to have those interactions, have discussions about social emotional well-being and learning. And so a lot of virtual activities are taking place for our students using our online platforms, such as Canvas and Teams, where we're working with large groups. And so counselors are having those opportunities where all kids can participate. We've seen self-care challenges, Who Are You activities, things like a mental health awareness week where we're talking about a statistics or a fact, and then providing students with the healthy coping skill to go with that. Social emotional themed weeks where they're addressing topics such as communication, anxiety, organization, staying connected, self-care, self-awareness, all of those SEL kinds of things. We've had college information sessions where students are invited, and in those sessions, they're learning about college, but they're also interacting with their peers and with counselors. Some schools are doing things like daily virtual virtual community circles. And I know some schools are beginning to host clubs and organizations online, and students who participate in sports are participating in conditioning and skills development as well. I also want to highlight the fact that we are working with small groups also, using our online platforms and in person, and these are often targeted groups. And definitely, if you as a parent are interested in having your child be seen in person, please reach out to the school. And we are also providing those individual check-ins with students. So counselors are checking in to just check in on how students are doing in terms of their mental health, adjusting by way of social emotional concerns. And so teachers are giving referrals to counselors and social workers. Again, parents are doing the referring. And then counselors from previous levels where kids have gone, say, from 5th grade to 6th grade, and a counselor may have seen some previous concerns. They'll share that with the next counselor. And then students, we've seen students doing the self-referring where they say, you know, I'm really not feeling well today, or I've got some things on my mind, and they're reaching out to the counselors on their own. So just want to remind you all as parents, if you feel that your child is experiencing social emotional difficulties or challenges with mental health, please reach out to your child's school counselor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, some other questions that are rolling in here. Why haven't schools implemented small groups for students? So many of our schools have implemented small groups. Certainly, this is an arrangement between parents and teachers. We are certainly looking for students to take advantage of small group instruction who might be falling significantly behind. That is the priority, but certainly if there is space that a teacher sees where a child needs additional enrichment, then that, again, I would encourage parents and teachers to have that conversation. We do have to be careful with the numbers of students because, again, we want to make sure that we are accounting for physical distancing and making sure that we're keeping everybody safe. But small group instruction is underway. We have buses running throughout the day, every day picking up kids and bringing them in. Again, we can only have so many, but I think that when those arrangements are made, then it is a benefit to our students, and we appreciate that. We appreciate transportation for making that happen for us. And if that's not happening and you need that to happen, please reach out to your school and to see if that's an option for your students as well. This one has to do, Mr. Perkins, this has to do with the playground. Will elementary students be able to use the playground?
So we have implemented through facilities and building ops a cleaning schedule for all playgrounds. The difficulty we have with playgrounds is a lot of our playgrounds have community access, and we don't want to control that because we want the community to have access to those playgrounds, and they do. You can drive by any of our playgrounds around the district and you'll see folks on them all the time. So what has happened is principals have called and I've talked with them, and I've informed them of the cleaning schedule. We've placed hand sanitizing stations by those, and I'm leaving that decision up to the principal on what they're comfortable with and how they want to use their playgrounds. There's many activities they can do outside of the playground themselves, but we do have a cleaning schedule for them.
Thank you. Along those lines, this question has come in as well. What additional steps are being taken to ensure schools are clean and safe?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we have worked with architects to work through the American Institute of Architects, their reopening guidelines, and the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers. We've worked with private companies, Tridem on filtration. We've worked with Trane on ventilation, and we have, of course, have followed all of these are CDC recommendations, and we've implemented many cleaning and disinfecting strategies around the district. And we audit those, and I have personally audited cleaning strategies around the district at least 3 times since we opened school over the last 4 weeks, to ensure that we're doing those checklists. We're showing that we are cleaning. All of our chemicals are listed in the EPA and CDC guidelines for killing COVID, and those are all being completed, and we are inspecting what we expect. And so I think out of all of that, I believe we are exceeding in some cases, and at a minimum meeting every recommendation from CDC when it comes to cleaning and disinfecting our schools.
Thank you for that. And I don't mean to keep picking on you, Mr. Perkins, but you just want to make sure that we're on one accord here with this one. It says, for the second 9 weeks, will siblings be able to attend the same 2 days? And I can say for that every effort will be made to make sure that siblings stay together. But in terms of transportation, that's why I'm picking on Mr. Perkins here. I know that if students, for instance, are in different households, then that could be a challenge, correct?
That is correct, Ms. White, but we will make every effort. As long as we know ahead of time, we will do what we can. But keep in mind that, it is going to be dependent upon how many children are coming to school and the capacities of the schools and how we can handle that. And transportation is the big trigger there, because social distancing on our buses limit us to about 20 children on average per bus. So that's the key, but we will do our very best to work those out and accommodate those where possible.
Thank you. Mr. Simmons, this one says, how can teachers get technology help instantly during the school day?
Okay, so we do have a help desk phone line, and you can call 853-6070, and we have ITRTs, we have technicians, any members of the technology staff might answer and be able to provide assistance. We also have ITRTs who are kind of offering instruction during the day to kind of work with teachers on Canvas issues.
Thank you for that. This is for Dr. Drury. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnston. Will elementary students in person still use Canvas when home 3 days?
Yes, Canvas will be an option that teachers will be able to create their lessons throughout the week, and so students will still be able to use Canvas when they're at home. That is correct.
All righty, Dr. Drury here. Any chance of having small group of musicians performing in person in the middle schools? You're muted. You're still muted.
There we go. I think it's quite possible. I think it would just be a matter of getting in touch with that particular principal and making that suggestion. You know, I think, did you say which school?
Woodrow Wilson.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen how how Bradley's doing his list, so that would be very likely that could happen. If the teacher requests it, that's fine.
This is a question for the group, and it says, I work in a daycare. Who can we contact in the school system for help? So if they work in a daycare center, they're working with students. Anyone want to chime in on that one?
Well, if they're working in a daycare, they're more than welcome to call my office, because more than likely they're working with younger children. That's a possibility. And you know, our phone number is 853-2300, and can give me a little bit more information. I'll be more than glad to help guide them and get some more information if they're having difficulty getting in touch with the school or just having difficulty with the technology. We've done that already this year, and so I'd be more than glad to help someone with that.
Thank you. This one, Dr. Drury, it says, will there still be SAT preparation for high school students?
And that's going to be something that is going to have to be set up through the school. I don't think that would be an issue either. I will talk to the principals about that and see if we can organize some kind of after school for that. But until then, I would suggest that if they want to start with SAT prep right now, that Khan Academy has a fantastic SAT prep program. But like I said, I will contact the principals and talk to them about that.
Thank you. We have quite a few questions that are coming in about preschool students, pre-K students, and kindergarten students in particular. It says, any chance they can go 4 days? This is, you know, again, in addition to, I think I said that the #1 question for teachers is about that asynchronous day, that asynchronous Friday. Certainly, if there's a #1 question for parents, it's about the younger students and coming more days per week. Like I said before, we want students in school, but as an early childhood educator and speaking with our early childhood teachers, and particularly teachers of younger children, it is more difficult online. We get that. And as a parent, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. We know that it is a little more challenging. So we're always looking for ways to bring students back, especially our youngest learners, our 4, 5, 6-year-old kids, where it's more challenging. And particularly what teachers just shared with us just within the last week was the challenge of the now going to second quarter, maybe having those 3 asynchronous days. So that's new to us in terms of understanding what students, young children, will do on those 3 days. And what teachers have asked us to do is to go back to the task force and to share that concern. And obviously, it's a concern of parents as well. So I just want you to know that for very young students, we hear you. We will share this with the task force as well. I know that we have an approved plan, but I also know that when we continue to hear the challenges around teaching children virtually at very young ages, that we should act on that. Certainly, we have to keep in mind everything that we started with: space, distance, staffing, health mitigation factors, and we need to continue to think about, if we bring students in 4 days per week, that means we have all kids at those grade levels, let's say pre-K to first grade, pre-K to 2, that's going to create more of a squeeze in a school, and distancing might be an issue. And that's the reason why I said for those 3 schools in particular, we would have to be creative, which means that we might have to physically move kids to other locations where we might have space. And so I want you to know that going in, so that there are no surprises. And if you're saying to us, great, go ahead, do that at any expense, we just need to make sure that we have kids in, then that's wonderful. We can look at that, and we are going to look at it. And one thing that I know for sure is that this week, we will take all of this feedback back to our task force, but I continue to see that it's coming up a lot in kind of in the questions here, and we just want to make sure that we are really addressing what you're bringing up time and time again. So we hear you, and we will take a close look at that in moving forward. The next question has to do with ventilation. So Mr. Perkins, it says, has anything been done to improve ventilation in schools?
The answer is yes. We've worked under the ASHRAE standards, which is the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. We have followed those guidelines. The recommendation is MERV 13 filters. We conducted a study. We have actually determined that we can place MERV 14 filters in all of our rooftop air handlers. So we will be placing those in those schools, all of our schools. We're working on making sure we have routine filtration changes, and I get updates as those are made from our supervisor in building ops. And we are also following, part of that standard requires us to flush the building in unoccupied times. And so we are flushing the building completely. And so our average air turnover rates, we calculate those as well. For example, Morningside, with our system that we have there, we can change the hour or the air 8.8 times per hour. And so we are making sure that we are testing all of our systems. We're doing that. We have 3 systems across the district. So we have done a large amount of work in ventilation and filtration for our schools.
Thank you. To that end, don't go anywhere, because one of the questions that just came in, it says, have schools been updated with better hand washing stations?
So what we have done is we contracted with an outside vendor. We are adding hand washing stations to every school. And as schools request, we purchased those hand washing stations. There's 60 spread out around the district. And as schools request where they have issues, we're adding leased hand washing stations. We are social distancing in our restrooms, so we know that is important, and we know hand washing, based on our discussions with our local health department, is the #1 way. So not only have we got hand sanitizing stations in every classroom and mobile ones throughout the building, we have now placed hand washing stations around all of our schools, and we are adding them at the request of principals on a weekly basis.
Thank you for that. Mr. Johnston, this one says, what happens to Plato if my student continues to be all virtual?
So what we're working on with Plato is that if they're all virtual, they'll still receive the Plato curriculum, and we're working on that currently. I've spoken with both Plato site principals along with our gifted and talented coordinator. We're working on how we can make that as streamlined as possible so that they're receiving the same instruction that's going on in person.
Thank you for that. Dr. Hahn, this says, what are the procedures for containment if a student tests positive for COVID?
Thank you. Good evening. Containment, that would, we would work with the student health and employee health, and then also with the Virginia Department of Health and our local health department. First, to recognize that we have a positive case within the school, and then each school has a health annex room. We would escort the individual to the health annex room and make the appropriate phone calls and take the appropriate measures to transport them home, and then work with the family and the education process and the quarantine process.
Thank you. So don't go anywhere, because the next one also says, how are the COVID cases? This is totally related, and maybe it's the same, but I do think there's a nuanced difference here. How are the COVID cases popping up throughout the district being addressed? I think specifically, I think what they're trying to get to is that those that have been, we know that we've had a positive case, what are our steps?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The positive cases are addressed on a case-by-case basis in collaboration with our student and employee health and our local health department. I spent a great deal of time, even today, with Dr. Odell and the Virginia Department of Health, and we work collaboratively with them and discussing each case, and really we take each case in totality of the circumstances and take that into consideration as we take the next steps in the decision making on what needs to happen.
Thank you. And either you or Mr. Perkins can take this one. If a student is riding the bus, tests positive, how will that be handled? So.
Sure. Well, I can take that one. If a student, sorry, if the student tests positive, then hopefully we would know before they're riding the bus, and we would communicate with the family to keep them home. And I would take this opportunity to just throw a plug into, as you stated earlier, we really need our parents and the community to support us in this effort to keep everyone safe and healthy and strong. And if your student is sick, keep them home. If you have questions, call the school. The schools, each one of our schools, we're so privileged to have a registered nurse at each school that can provide you with advice and assess your student if need be. But we really want you to keep your students home if they're not healthy.
Thank you for that. This one, and I'm going to ask Mr. Simmons to chime in here. I think this is from a student. Is there a way for Canvas assignment list to have checks next to the items that have been completed?
I'm not sure. If whoever the student or whoever posted that question, if you can post your name and phone number, I will have somebody reach out to you tomorrow with an answer.
Thank you for that. And this one says, when will the second 9 weeks begin? So we know that the first quarter ends October 30th. The second 9 weeks, anyone have that quick date for me?
November 2nd.
November
2nd.
It's November 2nd.
November 2nd. All right, thank you. Sorry, I have Mr. McLeod here on my, at my more than 6 feet away. Yes, he is. And wearing a mask. Yes, he is. All right, let's see. What's next? How will lunches be handled at school? So I believe this is a second quarter question about how lunches will be handled for in-person instruction.
So I'll take that. We have worked with Sodexo Magic. We have a process where we will be feeding students in classrooms because some of the CDC guidelines, we don't want clustering of students in the cafeteria. Those will be brought to the classroom. There'll be social distance in the classroom, and they'll be eating at their desk. We'll also continue our grab and goes, and we will hopefully have more opportunities based on the state providing extra money that we'll be able to put out through the credit card system that is currently going on now.
Thank you. Mrs. Steele, this one says, how can we get clubs online?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. There are club sponsors who've already been designated or who are being designated within the schools. So they will be setting that up, and there is a feature in Canvas that allows for announcements. So we can do announcements on Canvas, we can do announcements through our social media pages, various platforms to get the word out to students to sign up for clubs and organizations. So I'd say just be, looking out, and if there's something in particular that you're looking for and you haven't seen it, absolutely please reach out to your school counselor and they can help direct you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This one says, and Mr. Johnson, I believe this is for you, if elementary students do virtual learning the second 9 weeks, will there be synchronous instruction?
And you asked if they do virtual learning, was that the question?
If they do the virtual academy, will there be synchronous instruction?
Yes, ma'am. It'll be exactly like we're doing now. There'll be synchronous and asynchronous instruction, just like that is occurring during the first 9 weeks, so they will have synchronous.
Okay, and let's see. Mr. Perkins, this says, how are buses being cleaned?
So Durham School Services has a cleaning protocol that follows CDC, just like we have in our buildings. They're cleaned after all the runs or routes are made, and the chemicals they use are the same that are on the approved list from CDC. They keep tabs and checklists for those cleanings, and we communicate, like Dr. Hunter mentioned earlier, if there's any potential of exposure, we do communicate with Durham Services to make sure that cleaning does take place.
Thank you, and I know that we're rounding out our time here, and I feel like I'm on speed dating here, but it's, will there be high school graduation ceremonies? Dr. Drury, will there be high school graduation ceremonies?
At this point, we're hoping to, but it's going to depend upon what the governor decides and what phase we're in at that point. We will have a graduation ceremony, whether it is a traditional graduation ceremony or whether it is similar to one that we had, the ones that we had last year. It will depend, but we will have a graduation ceremony and all of our graduates will be celebrated as such.
Thank you. I do know that that's important for all of our seniors, and keep in mind that we are very sensitive when it comes to our seniors, and for all of our students, but particularly our seniors as well. And I completely understand. My daughter was a senior last year, missed her prom, missed her graduation, and so we do understand, and we want to do everything that we can to make sure that we get kids back, and so that they can have senior year. and that goes for all of our students. Just a couple of reminders before we wrap up here. If you want your child to remain 100% virtual for the entire second 9 weeks, you do have that option. Our middle and high school students will continue. The plan is to continue virtually, synchronous and with synchronous and asynchronous instruction until January. Keeping in mind the numbers, the space, the staff that we need to do so. Keeping in mind also those singleton classes. I remember that are really difficult for us when it comes to having both in-person and synchronous instruction for those singleton classes that's extraordinarily difficult. Not to say that we're not looking at other options, not to say that if we find a different solution, we won't bring them back sooner. We are still looking. So again, we are looking at other school systems. We're looking to see what they're doing. We're looking at what's best in practice. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we're adhering to health and safety standards for everyone. For parents of elementary school students, we do need your help. There will be an intent form for the second 9 weeks. Remember, baby steps. It is crucial for every parent and guardian to complete this form for each of their children. Your responses will help us determine the number of start and dismissal times, the actual start and dismissal times, the space needed in the building, and the use of bus transportation. So based on information received from the original intent form back in July, the start and dismissal times are likely to be either 7:30 to 2:30 or 8:30 to 3:30. However, there is the possibility that the start and dismissal times could change based on the collective responses from all of our parents. The reason has to do with transportation. We talked about that here tonight. Based on social distance guidelines from the health department and the CDC, we can fit an average of 20 students on a bus. So as you complete the intent form, please check bus rider if you absolutely need bus transportation. If your child absolutely needs bus transportation, I should say, the intent form will be available starting Monday, October 5th. And the deadline to complete the form is Friday, October 9th. We want to make sure that we have the numbers so that if we need to make any adjustments, we can communicate that to our school board by October 13th. The forms will be online and paper copies will be available at the schools. So again, I want to end in the way that I began, and that is with a thank you. Like I said, you could be anywhere else tonight, but you chose to be here with us. And certainly, as I'm looking at all of the questions, I want to thank you for participating tonight. Thank you for your questions. They make us better. They make us better as a school system. And so we appreciate your feedback. Keep in mind, Mr. McLeod, the email address again for feedback?
townhall@rcps.info.
townhall@rcps.info. So keep in mind that we are collecting your feedback and sharing each and every piece of feedback with our Transition and Restoration Task Force so that you know that you are being heard. I know that that's why you're here tonight, and I can't thank you enough. I want to thank our staff, our executive staff, for being here as well. Thanks to all of our principals, teachers, students, and parents for all of your hard work. We appreciate you, and we value your participation in Roanoke City Public Schools to make our students the best that they can be. We know that kids have to be at the center of every conversation, and that's exactly what we are doing each and every day. But we can't do it without you. So thanks for showing up tonight. Thanks for your feedback, and we will be around. You know me, I'll be around to your school, so I hope to see each of you sometime soon. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and have a great evening.